Dear friends and colleagues, I would like to welcome you to the International Aviation Summit. This event would not be possible without the valuable contribution of Athens International Airport and Golder Handling. But I would like to thank both organizations for helping today's event. The theme of the summit, as you already know, focuses on the future of air transport. Following the strategic topics discussed and the decision taken during the 41st ICAO Assembly, the International Aviation Summit brings together personalities, companies, and aviation organizations to explore opportunities and prepare for future challenges of global air transport. Partnerships among all different stakeholders are urgently needed. The summit will lay down the foundation for the launch of a new collaboration mechanism under form of high-level umbrella organization to ensure the global coordination decision-making processes for the top level of aviation leading organization and leaders. The launch of this initiative will be preceded by a strategic discussion on the future challenges of the global air transport. And now we have virtually by video the keynote speech of Salvatore Sakitano, the President of the Council, that was not able to come because he had to do some trips in Africa. Therefore, I'm really pleased because he put the scene about what we're going to plan to discuss. And then at the end of this day, one will have also Mehmet Nane coming from Pegasus and from Haydar. We will witness the launch, the initial launch of a new concept that together with Glenn and unfortunately due of the aviation challenges we lost two of the other members. That the one already sent a video, hoping to get also the other video that virtually will be able to be with us. Well, that's a good part of the COVID times. Therefore, to witness the launch of this new collaboration between all the different stakeholders. Then we move to Salvatore's speech and then we will continue with our panel. Thank you. Food for thought for cooperation. There is between organizations things are separate, but at the end there are many things that united us. Then don't forget that we are the first industry who worked together about environment. Then that was a success story. That was concluded. Some who were in ICAO almost 2 months ago when finally the deal was agreed between the states. Then innovation is an area of importance. It's also the area of data collecting. Then you saw at the end that Salvatore mentioned about we need to work together collectively, and this is where we need to work. And this is today this event allows us to food for thought and kind of think tank in order to explore how this will happen. Now I have the pleasure to invite my very good friend, Professor Andreas Papatheodorou, who is the president of Hellenic Aviation Society.
And congratulations on the organization of this event. It's always a pleasure to be here. As you can see, we have two panels. The first is mostly related to industry. Second is about regional organizations and authorities. And may I kindly invite the panelists of the first session to join us here. Mr. Haydar Yalcin, who is the former president of the EUROCONTROL Provision Council. Mr. Riccardo, Lambiris, who is the chairman of Athens International Airport, and Mr. Anastasios Raftopoulos, who is the CEO of Animawings. Please join us. Salvatore Sakitano mentioned earlier, it's crucial times for the aviation industry. We're gradually approaching the post-COVID-19 period. During the pandemic, we had lots of sweet talking. It was about a war against an unknown and invisible enemy. The idea was to be together, to stand against the pandemic. Now it's time to return to normality, but obviously a new normality. It's about building back better, and it's about partnerships very much based on solid financial and business foundations. also taking into consideration sustainability issues, including the economic, social and environmental pillar. And as we all know, if we are to build solid partnerships, we have to make sure that, first of all, we do realize what our common future is about. At the same time, we also find ways to address potential areas of conflict. So what we're going to essentially discuss in these two panels is issues related to synergies, conflicts, how we can address potential conflicts, how we can capitalize on existing and future synergies in order to have a brighter future for transport. So gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have you here. May I kindly ask you to say a few introductory words regarding your organization and yourself. Couple of minutes and then we proceed to questions. So Haydar, may I ask you to start, please?
Thank you, Professor. First, before starting, I would like to thank to Kostas for his kind invitation for being here, and it's really a pleasure for me to be here after a couple of years later. I am the former Deputy Director General of the Turkish Civil Aviation after 17 years, and I retired and joined to EUROCONTROL as the advisor to the Director General of EUROCONTROL currently. Also, I am the former President of the Provisional Council of EUROCONTRol.
Great, thank you so much. Riccardo, would you like to say a few things about yourself?
Yes, I'm Andreas, I'm chairman of the Athens airport. Whether you like it or not, you did come through Athens. So you know about the organization. I'm relatively new to the industry because my past is investment banking, and I was the head of the privatization agency for quite a few years, and I did the deals with the Athens airport. So that's me. That's me.
Okay, I'm an airline person from Aegean. In fact, I wear two hats. I'm a director in Aegean, and I also run this small airline startup in Romania. Different challenges, and my passion is network planning. Once network planning, always network planning.
Great, thank you so much, Anastasios. So I think we can start with questions. And Haydar, you, I suppose working and collaborating with EUROCONTROL must be a fascinating job. It's, as we all know, the air traffic manager in Europe. And obviously, if we are to have efficient operations, we need a solid collaboration of all involved stakeholders, airlines, airports, obviously a navigation service provider. So from your very wide experience, having worked across the industry, I would like to talk to us and discuss what do you think about all these collaborations, what do you think about areas of conflict, and how a regional organization fits into this frame.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, as you mentioned, I have spent many years for the national organization, Civil Aviation Authority of Turkey, and also for the regional organization. And as you know, aviation is a fundamental enabler of the social, economic, and cultural development of the countries, and through the mobility and connectivity. As Salvatore mentioned, I believe today we will repeat several times on sustainability, connectivity, and mobility. Facilitating the global cooperation, tightening links to the industry, and increasing information exchange are also important and key issues to for the development of safe and secure sustainable air transport system. And we need more collaboration and cooperation, especially on the challenges faced by global aviation to use the available resources in an efficient way and avoid duplication. I believe the pandemic was the great experience for all the stakeholders of aviation industry, because there are many different measures taken by different authorities, stakeholders, without having coordination each other. They have spent so many resources without coordination, but sometimes it was not so effective, and we have lost many resources for I can say nothing, but after some certain period of time, we have coordinated efforts thanks to ICAO for Council Aviation Recovery Task Force. So in the regional side, ECAC, EUROCONTROL and EASA have taken some active roles on that respect, to maintain the safety and security standards of the aviation. So all the experience shows that we need more cooperation, coordination and collaboration at all levels, within the national aviation system, within the regional system and global aviation system. So during the last 3 years there were no face-to-face meeting, but every week we had coordination meeting with ECAC, EUROCONTROL and EASA, and they provided extremely good synergy for having or working together to define the difficulties, challenges by all means, and then sharing the information, what kind of experience we have in a different level. As you said, cooperation and coordination really the key issues in order to overcome the difficulties on a global manner for overcome the difficulties like pandemic and others. Because some states, airports or different stakeholders have their own measures. Some of the states have closed the borders. Some of them have decided to use the vaccine, but they cannot reach some of them. And also, everybody is trying to reach the connectivity and sustainability. So these are, I believe, the key words. And the summary, my key message is we need more cooperation, coordination and collaboration at all levels. I believe EUROCONTROL during this pandemic period has done a great job to provide extremely detailed statistical information and providing the reasonable credits with interest rates to the ANSPs interested to use it. So the system should be kept on a good manner without damaging. So after a certain period of time, again, we need to use the system accordingly. I believe for the first moment, this is enough.
And I can certainly confirm that all the statistical information you provided is very important. And a bit further on that, you mentioned information sharing, but it's quite important. At the same time, as we said, there are potential conflicts, and obviously each party would like to keep part of the information for themselves. It's part of how business is performed. So how can we actually balance these issues?
I believe that the global aviation authorities, I'm referring to ICAO, they played a key role. At the beginning, I can say that they were a little bit late to take the action, to give the guidance for the related parties, but Council has decided to establish the CART group. Then they have 2-3 set of recommendations to provide guidance to all related parties. But again, it was not so completing the pictures. The regional organizations took the floor. EASA has issued several exemptions to keep the system safe, but without having some checks, they extended the validation of the certificates. EUROCONTROL has provided some data, but there is no flight, so there is no data from that perspective. But airport level, no flight, no aviation, ANSPs, no flight, no income, so everything was stopped. Therefore, we realized that we have to work together. Without having support from the other parties, by single authorities cannot do anything on a crisis at global level. So I believe pandemic has shown that everybody, all the partners or stakeholders should work together.
Great. Thank you so much.
Maybe synergy I can add, but let's give them a chance to.
Absolutely. So, Riccardo, Athens International Airport, very established one, and we can obviously say that the word partnership lies at the very heart of the airport, as it was established as a joint venture between the Greek state and private investors. So, what I would like to ask you is something similar. If you could kindly outline the key synergies and conflicts that have emerged across the transport supply chain in the post-COVID-19 environment from an airport point of view.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. This is a very broad topic, right? It's a very broad question. I think the supply chain, if you think of it, it impacts operations both at airports and airlines, and consequentially, it impacts countries' connectivity, right? Disruptions have both an economic impact, and that's throughout the supply chain, and at various levels of the supply chain, you will see that the impact is at different levels, and obviously you have an operational impact. So if you look at what happened with COVID-19, as you said earlier, the impact was huge and it was far-reaching, and disruptions have created a lot of problems. I'll give you a few examples, so I think to paint the picture. So I'm sure you all know the Boeing Dreamliner and the problems it created for United and American Airlines. And closer to the heart, actually at the Athens airport, we had some new routes which we were planning with some airlines, and unfortunately, because of delays in aircrafts, we were not able to have these airlines. So again, a problem in interconnectivity. Then, we saw with COVID, one of the biggest problems, I think, of our industry, but also of other industries, labor shortages, right? So they have impacted, I think, our industry in many ways, and if you look at it, how it has impacted the supply chain, the first you will see is a surge in raw material prices, right? And that has a very big impact in our industry because it delays investments in infrastructure, in particular in airports, and also the cost is much bigger. For instance, we have seen our own budget, just because of raw materials, increase somewhere between 20 to 30%, right? And that's material. If you think it's just because of this impact from the supply chain. The other thing is you have difficulties in scaling up. When I mean scaling up of production, right? So for instance, you have, and this is based on demand economics, so if you don't have the economics for demand to have this new increasing capacity, it's a problem, and you don't have the labor to have this, to support these production lines. I think a very good example is probably what's happening in the Ukraine. And if you look at the arsenal of Javelin air-to-land or air-to-air missiles, whereby both the US and Europe have had their arsenals depleted, the US at 1/3, I think Germany, the UK and France completely depleted. And whilst they have the technology, they have the know-how on how to roll out supply lines, they can't do it because there's no availability of funds and no labor. And actually, investment capital, and even more importantly, working capital, which supports the smoothness of the supply chains, become both more costly and more scarce. And this is another huge problem for our industry and more generally. Now, moving slightly on more high level, I would say the supply chain, as you all know, is impacted, as you said earlier as well, by politics, by policies, and just strategic issues. One which I think is increasingly becoming important is what I call technological starvation, right? And I think the best example of this is the decoupling between the US and China on semiconductors. This will mean that a number of products, a number of processes will not be able to be carried forward in the future. You may have a disconnect between technologies, so if you have two airports using different technologies or airlines, different technologies may have problems. This is something very new. I don't know how it's going to play out, but it definitely is one of the risks. Then another good example, I would say, is what's happening in Russia, right? Because of an embargo on spare parts, on manuals, on updates, Russian civil aviation, I guess, is becoming potentially less safe, right? And this is another issue. So if we bring it all together, you'll see that disruptions obviously have a dollar impact, but they also have impact in terms of scope. And this is why I think it's very important to identify the critical nodes within the supply chain, which make the difference and which actually you can fix. And this is where it becomes really interesting, because both in bad times, but also in good times, you have innovation. innovation within the supply chain. So in bad times, you have a problem, you have to resolve it, you have innovation, you find a solution, then it's carried on, right? In good times, you have the pressure of competition, so you need to be more efficient, you need to be faster. So this again is great. So I would say in conclusion, the supply chain is worth more than the sum of its parts.
Great, thank you so much. Tasso, coming to you, you manage a small but very dynamic airline, and obviously I suppose it's a challenge to operate in a post-COVID-19 environment. So again, a similar kind of question. Obviously, you know, if you're a big airline, you have a bargaining power to deal with the supply sector in a different way. Representing a smaller airline, what about challenges, what about synergies and conflicts that you face in the supply chain, and how you can potentially capitalize on synergies?
I think that the problems are the same whether the airline is big or small, at a different scale, of course. A small airline has much more limited resources, so maybe it is even more challenging. You do not have backup solutions. For this discussion, I would like to say that in 2019 we had a very good year, okay, but problems were apparent, and I can only wonder what would have happened if we hadn't had COVID in 2020, if we would have been able to cope with further growth following the very good year 2019. So we need to sort it out, and these problems that are becoming apparent or became apparent this year, the labor, the coordination between the various authorities or stakeholders, they're not completely surprising. We need to make an effort because the externalities and the challenges, you know, we go from COVID to the Ukraine war to maybe a recession next year, and then it will be some other challenge. It's a continuous situation that we have to face as an industry, and ultimately it is an industry about transporting people and bringing the economies of different countries closer. And so we are a very small part. You know, the company in Romania is 2 planes, so and our kind of operation was not affected because we were not flying to Western Europe. So we were flying to the Mediterranean basin, and more or less the challenges in Greece or in Turkey or in Egypt in the past year were not the ones that we were seeing in the news in the UK or in Holland, in Amsterdam, where it's a shambles. But you wonder, you know, because Romania is doing well and is growing and is developing, and I do not see any real investment in the infrastructure right now. What will happen a couple of years from now? Because the lead time to add capacity it goes into years to get the funds and to actually physically do what needs to be done. So the problems will continue, and the problems will pop up in different places as well. You know, it isn't. That is my observation from a small airline perspective.
And have you pursued any partnerships at a local level, or do you predominantly rely on the policies pursued by Aegean Airlines?
We are part owned by Aegean, but we are run as a separate entity. Aegean provides know-how and support, but we have our own commercial strategy, and we positioned slightly differently from Aegean.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And coming back to you, as we know, there are a number of different organizations in Europe. So EUROCONTROL is the network manager. We also have EASA. We have organizations representing airlines, ACI Europe, etc. What do you think about this ecosystem of regional organizations in Europe, and what are the prerequisites for partnerships among them? Because each of them represents a different part of a sector, and again, as we previously said, I wouldn't say a love and hate relationship, but there's certainly synergies and conflicts. How can you come together at a regional organization level?
Thank you, Professor. In fact, as the representative of non-EU EUROCONTROL or ECAC states, I have had different experiences during my period as the Turkish representative or as the president of the PC of EUROCONTROL. But from the EU state perspective, ECAC is decreasing their responsibilities, moving to EASA, so trying to use the effectivity of resources in an efficient way, and also avoiding duplication. In EUROCONTROL, I had the same thing. We have changed the scope of the work, moved to the rulemaking activities to EASA on safety manner. Trying to keep to discuss the single scope of work on each organization. But it's not so easy all the time, because as the non-EU states has faced some other difficulties. In one hand, try to avoid duplication, but on the other hand, we lost all the opportunities to have the rulemaking activities from the non-EU perspective. This just I remember when you asked me. But in Europe, I believe the coordination and the cooperation between the regional organizations are extremely well and getting improved. Look at the PRC issues, PRB issues in EUROCONTROL. One is going down, step down, and the other is taking care of the responsibilities. So the main issue is trust between the organizations. And we have faced difficulties. In one hand, 5 years ago, in one organization, the leader of the organization has difficulties with the others. There is no trust, confidence. So there was no coordination at the proper level, only asking the questions, maybe official statements, that created difficulties. But after changing the management, again you got the trust, confidence, then the system is working much better than the previous case. Sharing the knowledge. This is also another important issue. Whatever you have, if you share with the related parties on time, I believe it also creates trust, confidence, as well as the efficiency of the coordination activities. On the other hand, innovation. Time is going well, there are many different technological developments, so you have to be in line with innovation, and everybody is now talking about innovation. And we need to take the necessary actions for our organizations, taking care of safe, secure, and environmental friendly aviation. So we need to find agreed goals, because if the two organizations have the same kind of goals agreed in different domains, I believe it is much easier for them to cooperate and coordinate. If there is no common goal, what they will coordinate? Because there is no common goal. No need, they will go in a different direction, so it will not be possible to coordinate and cooperate. Also, the balance of return is another important issue. Maybe common goal, mutual respect, defined expectations can be added to that part. And the main issue is great two-way communications between the two organizations. If these kind of things are good, so they don't face any difficulties, I believe today EUROCONTROL, ICAC and EASA have great synergy between or among them, and I believe as the European aviation leaders, we face this experience, this good cooperation. I hope it will continue with an improvement way.
Great, thank you so much. And I take two keywords. One is about shared goals, and the other is about communication. We'll talk about communication later on anyway. And about shared goals, Riccardo, I mean, do you think it's possible to be friends with everyone? I mean, what are the prerequisites for a partnership spirit to prevail, and how we can use this, let's say, positive energy in order to find solutions and address the different conflictual areas?
Well, I think you said the door, right? I'll just say it slightly differently and from a different point of view. So, you know, if you think of it, like over the past few years, we've had, if not the greatest, one of the greatest shared goals globally, right? I don't think ever before has the whole of humanity had one common goal, and that was the fight against the pandemic, right? So if you think of it, I fully agree that, you know, goal setting, shared vision is what you need if you want to have a successful partnership. So that's the first. And maybe if we look at it for the supply chain, which you asked before, maybe sustainability, right? I think we'll all agree that sustainability could be a common goal for the supply chain, for instance. Now, so aligning parties behind the common goal is very important. You need leadership, right? You need very strong leadership to push through, to break silos, to make people get out of their comfort zone, because if they don't, innovation does not happen. And I'll go on the point of trust, which is again very important. And to get trust, you need transparency, and you often need to act with courageous integrity. And that again is very important if you are to build a partnership. And communication again is coming up. That's very important. And I think if you look at it on how the industry has evolved, you will see that the number of stakeholders within our ecosystem has grown, right? It's not what it used to be. You've had stakeholders which were there but were not very vocal, and now are significantly more vocal. So if you look at what happened in the pandemic, fighting COVID-19, you had civil protection, for instance, or the health authorities, which actually had a big say on our everyday business in the airport, in the airlines, everywhere, right? There was a way how you had to do it, and, you know, a few years ago, you know, they were virtually inexistent, right? Then if you look at it on the other side of the bracket, right, you have startups, like you have small companies which are actually driving our industry and which are changing the way we look at it and the way it's developing. So having and aligning all stakeholders, the traditional stakeholders, regulators, industry bodies, etc., with the new stakeholders that come in, comes down to communication and all the points, of course, that they put out before. So this is, let's say, at the high level, theoretical level, and then you have what I call the spirit of the partnership on a technical level, right? And if you want to get excellence there, I think, for instance, taking the supply chain, you need to find the critical nodes and the breakpoints, right? And for that, you need to find mitigation strategies. And all of this can only happen if you have everything else that we discussed before in line. You need to share information. I would say go even further in an open architecture way, right? Whereby everyone can contribute, everyone can change the way we're looking at things in a dynamic, real-time mode. You need to use innovation. Innovation is very important, and I'll give you an example actually. I'm a big fan of the metaverse and blockchain, despite what's happening with all these FTX and Bitcoins and whatever. Now, Renault, I know it's not in aviation, but Renault actually they've put their whole supply chain on the metaverse, backed by blockchain technology. So every single dealer, every single car, every single supplier is real-time updated in the metaverse. So you can understand the control they have on their supply chain. They can actually track a specific part where it is in the supply chain in the metaverse. And when you sell a car, it's out. It's not there anymore. So fantastic on innovation. And then you brought out another very important point, which you need to award risk with the right incentives or the right return. And for instance, if you look at the supply chain, you'll see that there's parts which I would say are not equally returned for the risk they are taking. And again, if you want to have a good partnership, you have to have a good allocation of risk return within the supply chain. So to conclude, I would say you need the right intentions, but you also need the right technical approach to have a good partnership.
Great, thank you so much. And can you give us some specific examples of Athens International Airport being involved in this context? The proactive action that we've taken in order to build such partnerships?
Sure. You said it earlier, we are a partnership ourselves, right? So it's in our DNA. So the way we approach it is, through long-term partnerships which are sustainable, in being able to outlive, over the years, and a win-win solutions for everyone, so everyone has to gain in an equitable manner. So, for instance, we are starting cooperation with one of the largest Italian airports, I can't tell you which one because we haven't announced it yet, to promote cultural heritage, right? And Greece and Italy, they have a humongous amount of cultural heritage, and just enhancing it through airports is absolutely fantastic. And if this works, we're planning to become a hub for culture within airports out of Athens. The second one, again, I can't announce, we're going to do a sister airport agreement with one of the largest airports in the US, and the fundamentals there is we want to promote further the US-Greek relationships. We want to make sure that we have all year-round flights to the US, but there's a number of other benefits. So, for instance, we have exchange of know-how, exchange of best practices. We're going to work together on common projects, so win-win for both parties. Then you have some partnerships that come out of need. So, for instance, we have at Athens Airport extra capacity cargo. So we thought, how can we actually leverage on this? We went to the Ministry of Agriculture, so we know that actually one of the most products that we export most as Greece is fishery from aquacultures. So we then tried to see what destinations they had an interest in fish, and found some airlines. So now we're all working together to make this supply chain of fish going out to other destinations. So we have new destinations, new airlines, so on and so forth. We're working with the prefecture of Athens, for instance, for medical tourism. Again, a win-win because we have increased footfall at the airport, but also you're helping Athens become a 365-day destination. I'll end on this one. We are working with Athens hoteliers. Actually, we started the process at the United Nations for a Greek breakfast day, right? So again, this promotes both the airport, but it also promotes Greece and it helps the hoteliers. So there's just a way on how we approach partnerships and where they come from, actually.
Thank you so much. And Tasso, what do you think about all these partnerships? And usually we use the term leverage to, from a financial point of view, but I think that in the context of an airline and also a small airline, it is crucial to have your voice heard across the supply chain. So how do you work in terms of partnerships? How can you actually build all these synergies and deal with conflicts? Is it necessary to be nice to everyone? Is it possible to make strategic choices in terms of your partners? And can you also provide us with a few examples on that?
Examples. Okay. Main customer is also a shareholder, and he's a tour operator. And in effect, it is a partnership, and we are providing in a reliable way transportation for the needs of the tour operator, who is, I think, the largest one in Romania. So they have stakeholders. We have to think sometimes a bit outside of the airport or the narrow confines. This is how we approach the idea. Now, in relation to how we deal with situations. Yes, common law is a very, very good point. I think that the pandemic in the European Union was catalytic in getting the various parties and governments to align. It took some time in the beginning, but at some point I think we need more high-level alignment, and this trickles down to all the small players like us. I believe that further, and this is a personal opinion, further liberalization would allow alignment on practical things across the globe much more easily. Because our industry is a bit strange, that it is still perceived as being related to national sovereignty, and it should not. This would facilitate partnerships across continents and on a more global scale. Are we there? No. Will it ever happen? Very good question. But this is what I think. I mean, other industries have achieved way more, which are not so high profile.
And do you think there is any added value for airlines of the size of Animawings to become involved in international fora and become members of international organizations, or do you think this is just for the big ones?
For the big ones, it's a matter of resources and matter of time and the people you have and the expertise. In a small organization, you have people who are doing many different things, and you also are relatively insignificant in being able to influence situations. So to be realistic, no, I do not believe it would be desirable, but I do not believe it would work for an airline like the one I'm involved in.
Okay, great, thank you. And Haydar, coming to another issue you mentioned, which is about communication, and obviously communication among the different regional and international organizations is very important. At the same time, we know that the industry is to some extent, if possibly to a large extent, under attack regarding its environmental performance. So it's very important to communicate effectively and convey the benefits of transport. So what do you think about this issue? Because it's nice to talk among us, but we're more or less in agreement in terms of the benefits of transport. How we can actually communicate all the above at a wider level to a wider audience in order to have a more prosperous future for transport?
I believe everybody's agreed with that this is important for the healthy partnership. We have mentioned about the trust, the agreed goals, and transparency, the strong leadership. They are the important things for that kind of communication. But the common goals and common objectives will be the key issues for that. And also the transparency and trust are again the main issues for keeping the communication. I think we need to find the common interest first. If for example, some of the interest for airline is not the interest of the airport, because they have different interest. One is benefit for the airline, but the other one, the same issue may not be the same interest level for the airports. So we need to create some grouping having the same kind of interest. I believe that will make our lives easier to spend our limited resources as the small airlines. So for having the higher beneficiary rates, small airline may have some other priorities. The big one, whereas the big one may not have the same priority on the same issues. But in order to keep alive, they have to give the priority to the same or to that issues which is not interested by the other big airlines or other parties. Therefore, we need to find the common goals, transparency, and with trust, then the communication will be improved, and also we will be able to reach the common goals.
Thank you very much. And Riccardo, what do you think about the role of communications? Is this an important, I think especially with respect to your airport, how important are communications for Athens International Airport?
Okay, just I need to say that between airlines and the others and airports are always right?
But if no airline flies...
That's true, very true. No, communication is very important. You need to be able to put your message out, and you need to be able to put it out in the right way. I think as coming from the outside, actually, as I said, I'm relatively new to the industry, I was shocked by the fact that, we don't seem to be communicating the key statistics about the industry, right? We are a problem, obviously, and we all agree that, we need to be sustainable, we need to get our act together. Unfortunately, technology is not on our side. Maybe for airports it's easier to do, but the, actual airlines, technology is not there. And when you think of it, if you just say that 3% of total global house emissions are the airline industry and the airports, so aviation, it's very small compared to the rest, right? Obviously it's going to grow as others go down, but hopefully by then technology will get out. So I think we've got undue pressure from everyone, and we've not been putting out the messages because we have been too shy about it. And now I think we're in a conundrum whereby we can't really speak. We've got all these investments that need to be done. No one is discussing the issue about who's going to pay for this, because obviously, if I'm, as an airport, if I'm going to invest in extra infrastructure, I'm going to look for a return. I've got private shareholders, right? And I have to get this return back. So I'll either increase my charges, which will increase your airfares, which will make it harder, or I'll have reduced demand and, routes, and people will say, why aren't you flying to X and Y? So it's a political problem which no one is talking about, and I think we're going to hit a brick wall sooner or later. So communication and putting the points out, I think, is critical, both for airports, both for airlines, for the whole aviation sector as a whole.
Thank you. And Tasso, obviously you are a small airline, so as you mentioned before, there is an issue about constraints in terms of resources, but do you think there is an important role for communications to be played in your context?
I won't speak on behalf of the small airline, because our voice cannot really be heard. But from an airline perspective, and in effect I agree with what Riccardo just said. We have to be quite careful what we promise and what we say. Exactly because the technology is not there, and we are creating expectations for things. I mean, just the certification cycle for a plane which is using current technology is a long, protracted, risky, very expensive process. Just imagine trying to get a completely new airframe with completely new power plant technology certified to fly passengers. So we need to be, as an industry, careful, because some of the things that are promised or mentioned I do not believe are realistic. And this can backfire.
So meeting expectations is obviously very important.
So it has to do with communication as well, yes. So we won't see electric planes flying around with passengers in 2 years from now, to be realistic. We like it or not. We wish would be the case, but it's not going to happen.
Great, thank you so much. I think we still have time for a few questions. Gentlemen, ladies. Please.
I'm Radu from Fly One Airlines, newcomer to Romanian market. And question to the CEO of Animawings. The question is about the impact on credibility from passenger side over the industry after the insolvency of Blue Air. Do you feel it? How you feel it? And which is the impact on as a whole on the image of the industry?
Okay, I'm
Thank you.
not Romanian and not I'm a bit of an outsider there. My answer is that there is a regulation, it's EU 261, it needs to be applied. It should have been applied in the very first place. We like it or not, that's the law for all of us in the European Union. It was not applied, and that's why this situation and this has an impact on all of us, and this has an impact because the consumers in Romania do not trust.
Exactly.
This is the outcome from this situation. So it is expensive. Yes, we are held accountable sometimes to pay things in compensation which is not under our direct control, but it is a law, and it should have been applied. That's and this is very outspoken from my point of view. But this applies to any country. It doesn't apply only to the EU.
Thank you. Another question? Please, Kostas.
Well, today we speak about partnership and cooperation, and very clearly you said that there is about trust and communication between. Do you believe there are more things in common that separate the different entities? You represent an airport and airline. There is, always a fight between airport and airlines, also with the authorities. Then, where is the message? Where we can help to improve the business? At the end, we are on the same side. We are in the same boat.
Kostas, with Athens Airport, we have
No, I'm not
by
talking
now a very well-established cooperation.
No, but in general, I'm not talking, from your experience, okay, you're a newcomer, but you have a huge experience also in Aegean Airlines.
We built the airport.
But the thing is, can really work together? Can we work together? Because it's not only, the aviation chain is not only the airports and airlines, it's also the suppliers, it's all
At
the
the high level
regulators and so on.
cooperate. Now that you will have disagreements, and I mean, even in the best of marriages, you have disagreements, and you have the better or not so good periods. So this is the answer, but ultimately we're working for a common goal.
No, I think seeing a number of industries, what characterizes maybe the aviation sector is that it's quite fragmented, right? So there's many bodies, there's many stakeholders, maybe more so than other industries. And what is also impressive is that they actually work quite well together. And I think this has to do because it's a highly regulated industry at the end of the day. So I fully agree with Tassos, you'll always have conflicts, you will always have diverging views and diverging interests, and the pendulum may sweep one day towards the airports where they make more returns, one day towards the airlines, one day towards the handlers. But all in all, I think it's quite an equitable market, and that's why it's worked so well. And I think what you said earlier about how the pandemic has actually brought us together, I think that was a very, very big test of our industry. And I agree with Jay that maybe the global regulators were a bit late in responding, but when they did respond, I think they responded very well. And that's why we're up and running now, right? And if you look at the number of bankruptcies in the industry as a whole, it's very low if you think of what happened right with the pandemic. It's very low, and that's why because everyone came together, governments included, right? Which actually put taxpayer money behind the industry, which is very important. So I think it's actually one of the industries that work well.
I believe there is
Safely,
And safely, yes.
Yeah.
I believe there is no common solution or one solution to answer your question, Kostas, because the challenges of the supply chain are different. When we look at them, keeping the prices down to customer industry demands should be keeping up, and also the reliable carrier capacity is essential. that kind of things, delivery performance, picking up the issues, something. So it's not so easy to find that one single statement or solution to keep up the solution from different perspective. But we need to have some grouping, having the common interest. I believe they can find a suitable solution.
The common interest, that's the question.
Common interest, yes, the contributing small part of the big picture. At the end, the integration of the solutions may help to improve the current system.
Please, if I may, we have the industry in front of us. As regulators, we are looking at the industry, we love the industry, but still we need to oversee the industry. How it can be better? Riccardo just said an over-regulated industry. Okay, we are happy with the performance. Remember a few years ago, 50 fatalities for 4.1 billion passengers transported. It's huge in terms of performance. However, still there are challenges and blockages and bottlenecks between regulators and industry. How we can help better, how we can collaborate better. Tell us, because you don't have any regulator in the panel, but we would love to know how we can make it better for all of us.
I think it comes down to communication, right? We need, I mean, I was lucky enough to go to the ICAO assembly, and I didn't think industry was, obviously you have the industry bodies which represent very well industry on specific topics, but my recommendation would be to have, for instance, 4 or 5 actual companies being there representing on a rotational basis, just to hear actually the business perspective, because industry bodies, they have wider themes, but you also need to hear from the industry directly. And you need to have it also at various levels, so small to big companies which have differentiating views. So I think communication and dialogue needs to be increased, and I think that will make a big difference. And thank you for the question, by the way, because it shows a very open-minded regulator.
But also I look
Mr.
forward,
Radu is not a mind person.
I look forward to having the regulator session, so just after this one.
To ask questions.
But also, I would like to say that during the pandemic, regulatory authorities and all the industry partners have played their role in a proper manner, and the regulatory authorities have enough level of flexibility to appreciate the needs and support to be provided to the industry, because without industry, no regulatory activity, there's no meaning. No flight from the airlines, airports, ANSPs, regulatory system, all stopped. Therefore, everybody has understood each other that they need to have the partnership, and flexibility, I believe, is the key word from the regulatory perspective. And we have seen and faced and experienced from the related authorities.
Hasan? Any comments?
No.
Not because I used to be the Director General of Civil Aviation. The regulatory system is perfect there, but thank you.
No, okay. The regulatory framework in the European Union
It's
is
well
not
established,
up to each member state right now. So there's a great level, and we look forward from an airline perspective that for more harmonization. This will, which there have been significant steps in that direction.
Yeah, one link again with the thing today and what we're going to do later today. It's our organization with PIACA, IARA, CANZO and ASA. We plan to work together, find a way to work together and to collaborate closely. Then we, of course, will try to bring on board ICAO and ACI. And the question is, what do you expect from this kind of collaboration? What is your wish list from this kind of organization? Represent, of course, you have your organization, ACI World, and IARA, and so on. But what is your wish list? What is you expect from this collaboration? What you want this will bring to your day activities?
Okay, maybe take it a bit differently. If you think of the past 100 years, right, you have, I think the current setup has served us very well, right? And you have global, regional, local regulators, you have industry bodies, ACI, IATA, so on and so forth. You have governments, and you know they work together, and you know we've got our differences, etc. But if you think of what's happened for the past 50 years, for instance, you've had one crisis at a time. So you had the 1973, 1979 oil crisis. You had 9/11, right? You had the Lehman 2008 subprime crisis.
The Gulf War.
The Gulf War. Today, you have pandemic, have economic recession.
Bonus.
Sorry?
Bonus.
Bonus, yes.
All together.
You have the Ukraine, and you have climate change, which is huge, right? So I think for specific issues, you need one voice out of the industry, right? So you need to select what these very important issues are, and there you need alignment and all what we discussed before, you know, about goal setting, about communication, about integrity, about trust, needs to come in on these issues. And that's what I would expect. So for these very important issues, let's say it's climate change, we need one voice. And as I said before, we have a big problem as an industry, and that's why we need to be heard, and we need to step and really support this one voice. So that would be my answer to you, Kostas.
Yeah, it goes back to the fragmentation, which is a valid observation. But it also has to do in that as an industry, you know, the regulation in Europe is 30 years old. Okay. Privately owned and run airports is even more recent, in fact. And in the other stakeholders, in effect, it's still state. So there's this different phases, and some things have moved, and some things. So it is also structural, and some things are inherently going always to be government, or most likely be government controlled.
I may only say that the common goal should be defined by each parties because each group has different objectives. Flexibility, again, between them, and respect their goals and establishment. So if they try to understand and appreciate the needs, their needs, again, by using the proper way of communication, they can find a suitable way to improve the current system.
Great, so I think we need to bring this to a conclusion. So in a nutshell, in a few points, the key takeaways from this discussion. Haydar, I will start with you.
Communication, coordination, cooperation, and commitment.
So the 4 C's, huh?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Tasso?
I tend to agree with Haydar.
Thank you.
I think he covers him quite well.
Thank you.
I tend to agree with Tassos.
With the airline.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for this. And I think we can now move ahead to our next panel. So basically, we're going to continue the discussion that we started in the previous panel, but in a slightly different context, given that you all represent organizations. So one of the things we're going to discuss is about dynamics among your members, and also dynamics between your organizations and other organizations. Today I can start with Nari asking you to say a few things about your organization, some introductory notes, and then we'll move forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor. Let me also start by thanking Kostas. This has been quite some time in coming. It should have been here since 2019, but nothing before its time. This is really a great opportunity, and I thank you for this. My substantive role is Director General of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority since 2014. However, recently seconded to ICAO as Jamaica's representative on the council of ICAO, having recently been elected to the council. I also wear another hat, which is the chairman of the board of the regional organization, the Caribbean Aviation Safety and Security Oversight System, which is made up of 7 civil aviation authorities in the Caribbean. So I think this is very timely, to discuss these types of activities coming out of the pandemic, but also what we can do to go forward. And I think it's very useful that we have a wide cross-section of the industry that is represented here. So looking forward to the very useful discussions.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, and once again, thank you for this invitation. It's an important moment. It's the end of the year. We need to draw some conclusions of the first year post-pandemic and what we are doing here. Today I'm the Director General of Aviation Administration of Kazakhstan, the Civil Aviation Authority. In the past, I'm an aerospace engineer. I used to run the accident investigation body of Romania. I was Director General for 7 years, and after that I became Director in charge of aviation safety in ICAO. I also hold the Vice President position in EUROCONTROL and President of Riccardo for 2 mandates. But the most important is I've been always on the side of the regulators and with great experience at the national, regional and global level. So this brought me in a position where I can really bring some added value and try to influence and try to work with all the stakeholders to bring more added value to our beautiful industry of aviation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thomas?
Thank you, Kostas, of course, for the invitation. It's been on my agenda quite a while, so I'm really looking forward to this. I am the founding managing director of Airlines for Europe. It's good to see you again, Tassos. You used to be on my board until recently. Yeah, in 2016, before I was the chief lobbyist for one of the main suppliers of aerospace parts in Brussels as well. I'm also still functioning until the end of the year as vice chair of the network management board of EUROCONTROL. So in my role, I have the opportunity to work for an organization that represents about 3/4 of passenger traffic in Europe, at least the airlines. We represent the inter-interest in Brussels. And in my position, I've been able to work with a lot of stakeholders, both from the government side, but also not only the airspace users, IATA, but also, of course, the airports and all the people of the value chain, or the supply chain, I should say. And that's why the previous discussion has been quite interesting. The main foci for us, from an A4E perspective, is indeed actually trying to get some true collaboration. So the conclusions from the previous panel were also very interesting for me. And I mean then true collaboration, not just say that we should collaborate, because you hear that very often at all levels, but it's not always done. And I think to do that, and just to close on that introduction, I think we need strong leadership with those people that represent you, or represent the stakeholders, in this case in Brussels. And also people who are smart in the sense that actually can collaborate, or actually have the mandate to collaborate and are willing to collaborate. And it's not an easy thing, but I think going forward, and I've heard some voices like Willie Walsh earlier this week, when the new McKinsey study was launched, which is all about the supply chain and the roles of airlines in the value of aviation. So I think we need to move, we at least as A4E, and it looks like together with Iatrou, we're going to put much more focus on showing the value, not only the economic value, but also societal value of aviation, to bring more of a positive message. The last couple of years have been extremely difficult, and also the way we've been perceived under sustainability is not doing enough. It's been an uphill battle and struggle. So I think really we need to bring out a positive message. That seems to be the consensus amongst the leadership European Airlines. So just want to stop there. So looking forward to the debate.
Great, thank you so much. So in order to set the framework for what we discussed before regarding synergies and conflicts, in a number of countries around the world, civil aviation authorities act as both regulators and operators. So, for example, in Greece, until a couple of years ago, the Hellenic Civil Aviation Authority was in charge of having the market oversight. At the same time, they were operating a number of airports and they were in charge of air navigation service provision. So, first thing I would like to ask you is how the situation in Jamaica. Do you have a separation of the regulator from the operator, or do you perform both functions?
Right, so in Jamaica we are both the regulator and the air navigation service provider. The airports are operated separately. There's an airports authority in Jamaica. Our two main international airports have been privatized. So the AAJ oversees the airports only from the perspective of the concession agreement. But safety and security oversight is done by the authority and of course the air navigation service. There are some challenges. We do have a functional separation in that there's the Director General's office and then there are Deputy Directors General for each, for the ANSP and for the regulator. So we do have that functional separation.
Does it work effectively, or are there any challenges?
It works effectively. There are some areas that are still very some gray areas, especially in the one safety management. The accountable officer for the safety management system. So there are some gray areas that need to be worked out. My personal view is I think there should be a separation, a clear organizational separation between the service provider and the regulator, but under the circumstances. And there are several examples across the world that works, but there still is that potential for conflicts.
Great, thank you. Catalin, how's the situation in Kazakhstan?
We were lucky to have a full separation of air navigation service provisions by the regulator, and 3 years ago, in fact, the government took the decision to separate also and to apply the British model where you have policies and bilateral within the Ministry of Transport, while the regulator and the oversight capability is fully in an agency, independent agency, run by experts, as you see nowadays. So practically 3 years ago, this agency was created in order to fulfill the oversight role over the aviation industry in Kazakhstan. So we are fully separated. We are operating in a kind of European approach with all the models that we are using here, starting with the British model, now more towards EASA and the European regulation. Of course, great partnership with all the big regulators all over the world, including FAA and our colleagues from CASA from different parts of the world. But what is most important is that we are in an area that it's not. It's something that is very poorly known at the global level as aviation activity. Central Asia, it's far away from everything. So practically what we are trying to do right now is to coagulate our efforts and to try to raise our voice, because we represent a player. Every player in aviation is important, and what we consider as the future is the possibility to work together and to explore the best way to work together. Unfortunately, all over the world we are fragmented right now. Okay, 193 civil aviation authorities, and we are all praising for harmonization and to try to play the same implementation roles in our countries. Which is quasi impossible in terms of resources, in terms of application to the national regulations. So what we and I see as the future is to become more regional, to work in a collaborative manner, and to try to explore better solution to regulate and to oversee the industry. So practically a part of the internal Kazakhstani aviation framework, we are looking really forward to work with our colleagues from the Caspian area, from the stands, and to try to build together a more powerful structure that will have a say and better resources and a more efficient and effective way to deal with our mandated responsibilities.
Thank you very much. And Thomas, what do you think about this functional separation between regulators and regulators? Do you think it's important, or is it not that important that for airlines, it's just business as usual.
No, I think it's very important. You know, looking from a Brussels perspective, I think things are pretty well organized, and that's something we, as A3, we continue to promote. There are, maybe to come back to this of how to work closer together, there are actually a number of opportunities, I think, for more transparency. I think the leadership of EUROCONTROL, to take a good example, who unfortunately he's leaving, as you all know, but Eamon brought really a fresh wind in EUROCONTROL, and we talked about trust before. He really, as the semi-regulator, so to speak, brought trust, and that has had a huge positive effect also on many of the CEOs from European airlines. If you would ask them today, what do you think about EUROCONTROL, that was like, great. But it's a lot also about the people who are behind it, about the leadership. And that's something what we have accomplished, for instance, with, which we already had with the Commission, but really now with EUROCONTROL, and also EASA to a very large extent, the trust that we have built up, because we've seen good dialogue, good results. We hope that with the next generation EUROCONTROL, with the new leadership as of next year, we're able to continue to do that. I think what would be very unfortunate is, you know, operators versus regulators, is that, and again, it works well, I would say, for 95% in Brussels. We can still make some improvements, that we would take a step back for whatever reasons, for political reasons. This is sometimes you see it that from, I would say, the national level, that influencing in Brussels, where things get blocked for purely political reasons. And from a technical perspective, you don't understand sometimes where this comes from, and then you find out it comes from one or that capital for some totally different political reasons which have nothing to do with the particular file. Things are being blocked, and sometimes in a very dogmatic reason. But it is really pure politics, sometimes party politics, also at the level of the European Parliament. The discussion that's going on now with regards to sustainability, if you're asking me, how do, you know, our CEOs feel when they meet the members of the European Parliament? Well, in the majority of those encounters, it's quite negative, because the people in the Parliament, and I have full appreciation for the fact they don't have the resources as congressmen have in Washington DC, with their big offices and lots of assistants. Process is very different, the resources are limited. But you see that for pure political reasons, from the Green, not only from the Green angle, but when the word sustainability is mentioned, all of a sudden everyone freezes in, I would say, a quite dogmatic manner, and they lose touch of reality. Now, it's our job as lobbyists to educate them, continue to educate them. And it used to work very well, but for instance, with this European Parliament, and parliamentarians tell me myself on a regular basis, please come and educate our colleagues. But even this education now doesn't help, because the politics have taken over. So the train has left certain things. Sustainability, I think, is a flagrant example. And of course, you cannot be against recognizing the role of aviation, which needs to continue to reduce emissions. The question is now, at which pace it's been accelerated, what we have done for decades ago, in cooperation with the airports, with the OEMs mainly, because, but now, for instance, on sustainable aviation fuels, I think we need the reality check. In fact, the recognition, everyone is saying they're not available, and still on the other side of the table, the legislator votes, let's vote for it, let's make it mandatory. So there is a major disconnect at the moment. There are also some other files, but to come back to your question, yes, it is extremely important that the relationship between operator and regulator, that we continue to improve it. And I would say try to keep the politics, the party politics out of it, because, you know, we're a business. You know, irrespective which party is in charge in the country or which majority you have in the European Parliament, we need to move on, we need to create jobs, we need to grow. Whether you're on the left, the right, or the center side, it should not matter, because we're talking about jobs, we're talking about making things more sustainable, and we're talking about European, a very important European industry, which, by the way, we also have a huge impact on European tourism. I had, just to close on that, a good example of close collaboration amongst European associations since COVID. We have worked with almost 50 associations, including a large number of tourism associations, who actually cannot function without air travel being promoted. If we are blocked, if people cannot fly, there's no tourism, to put it bluntly, especially in the southern European countries. Now, COVID has really brought us together, has showed us to work together. Yesterday I had a dinner discussion with main representatives also at the global level, with the WTTC and the ETC, the European version WTTC, on what can we do next steps post-COVID. There's so much to do in terms of sustainability. So that's the good thing, one of the few good things about COVID. We didn't waste a good crisis, actually brought us together. Also many of these associations that we were not always friends with before, like ACI Europe, on an ad hoc basis, as long as we don't talk about airport charges, we're actually on the same page in 99% of the cases, and it works well. So Oliver Jankovic and myself, we take a very professional approach. Okay, what's on the table? Is it entry-exit system? Is it aviation tax? Is it availability of sustainable aviation fuels? Is it availability of infrastructure for these fuels and hydrogen going forward on airports? There's no discussion on the same page. And it's extremely powerful that we are on the same page in Brussels. And I would add European Regional Airlines Association. I would even add CANSO sometimes. And sometimes the OEMs. But the OEMs will have a little bit more work because they only think about how can I get more money to fund my next technology, which is in the market in 10 years' time. So they're a little bit more long thinking. We're of course much more shorter thinking, but it's extremely powerful. And thank you very much, COVID. This is something you gave us. By the way, the DCC, the digital COVID certificate, was really driven by ACI Europe and A4E, with the Commission of course. But if we did not, so Olivier and myself, my teams, if we did not push enough last year to get this done with this simple app, the Commission had the app developed in 1 month's time with the industry. And it's thanks to this collaboration, real collaboration, because we had the same objective in mind. The project was, how can we reopen the borders as soon as possible? And two, how can we give the passenger the confidence to travel again? So not to overcomplicate things with dozens of different forms, no. One app, which you can use within Schengen, and by the way, lots of third countries have adapted that model. And then secondly, so give the confidence, therefore putting the politicians under pressure to say, oh yes, this app is actually a good idea because my voters like this app, so let's accept this app. So I'll stop there, but I'm actually, since COVID, I'm much more optimistic in terms of the collaboration amongst the stakeholders. But I do think we still need a little bit of work towards the regulators, whether it's Parliament, European Commission. EUROCONTROL has improved a lot, EASA as well with Patrick Key, but some of these people are moving. So I'm praying for the next leadership actually to keep the front and to continue to include airports and airspace users in full transparency as they have done under their leadership. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Thomas. And to bring the discussion forward, I think you raised a very important issue about stakeholder management. And coming to you, Nari, the previous discussion was, I would say, predominantly Europe-dominated. Obviously, you come from a different region. In Europe, we have, the most important supranational organization at the world level, meaning the European Union, with different functions and obviously organizations, including EASA. How's the situation in the Caribbean, where you have a very fragmented structure in terms of many different member states? And would you like to say a few things more about collaboration among different stakeholders and also among the aviation-related organizations in the Caribbean?
Certainly. So I'll speak to it from two perspectives, from a local perspective and a regional perspective. So from the region, we do have what's called the CARICOM community. So all the states of the Caribbean are members of CARICOM. The Association of Civil Aviation of the Caribbean, 7 CAAs that I mentioned earlier. There are, we have, from somewhat complex or developed civil aviation structures to some that are quite strong. So we have Haiti, which has very low effective implementation of ICAO standards. And we come through Barbados, Suriname, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad. Jamaica and Trinidad of the grouping has the highest level of effective implementation, over the 80%. So there really were some challenges given the development of the civil aviation structure. But I don't think CARICOM per se really took the lead that they should have. But then you have the individual states that had their own priorities, and so I'll speak to it from Jamaica's perspective now, in that, you know, just after COVID, when everything closed, everything was shut down, a task force was implemented through the Office of the Prime Minister. And so you had representation from the Ministry of Health, Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Tourism. What was missing from that was transport. And I think after their first or second meeting, you know, the light bulb went off and said, well, where are the airports? Where's the Civil Aviation Authority? Because now we're looking at, you know, how are we going to get things in? Borders are closed. How are they going to come in? We're an island. They need to come by here. So, you know, there was that missing piece. And it is something that we have had to fight with or grapple with. That we're not considered right at the outset, you know, that we're an integral part of this ecosystem. I mean, suffice it to say, we were included, and you know, we managed to have come up with the type of strategies, and the collaboration, albeit a little bit late, I think worked very well. But